Hello everyone, my name is Triton Perrin, and I'm here today to talk to you about two different things. The first is Black Rooster Audio. There's a fairly new company. They have a free plugin, which is kind of an interesting plugin, but they also have an LA-2A and LA-3A thing, which is really cool. And I did test it out myself, and I ended up kind of liking the way it sounded. So if we go to the products here, we can see there's the VLA-2A, the 3A, and the Canary. I think if you like them on Facebook, you're entered into a contest to win the LA-2A and LA-3A together. Other than that, they have this free plugin called the Canary, which is like it has attack and sustain, so it's like a transient designer is what it sort of feels like at first, but it also sort of responds a bit like Waves R bass, which adds some extra harmonics to make a sound bigger. So it's definitely something that you guys should test out on your drums. I'm not 100% sure I'm sold on the Canary plugin, but I am for sure sold on the LA-2A and LA-3A. They seem to have done a good job, and so we're going to look at that here in a second. For this video, I'm using tracks from the Locomotive mini song mix-off from a long time ago. I did this when it first came out, and I ended up submitting a mix and actually ended up doing pretty well. I got into the top 10 mixes here. And here, Triton Perrin. I kind of wasn't expecting it because I just did a headphone mix and it was just sort of something for fun, but I guess they ended up liking it, so I did okay. Now, there were some things that I messed up on, so I was thinking that I could do a mixing tutorial using these tracks. A fun little mixing tutorial with a short song that I feel like was recorded very well. We heard with very nice microphones into this 286A preamp, which sounds really good. So let's go back to the Black Rooster Audio stuff. Quick note about the price, $129 and $79 for these. It seems like it would seem expensive, but about $100 is normal for plugins. But also if you think about the Waves, LA-2A is around $250 by itself, but they often have sales. And so you can probably get the Black Rooster Audio one on a sale as well. Let's go and look at Reaper so we can check out the VLA-2A in comparison to the one I currently use, which is the CA2A by Cakewalk. All right, so here we are in Reaper. I guess if I close this, you can see that this really is a short song, and there aren't that many tracks. It's like a minute, basically a minute long. I find this to be a great starting point for learning how to mix, because the tracks themselves are very decent, and you really just have to focus on basic EQ and compression techniques, which is why I thought I would want to do this want to use these tracks for a mix walkthrough. So quick note, I do have a couple things on the master here. It's an EQ, the Soundtoys EQ, acoustic guitar, compressor, and then the Kratos maximizer. The maximizer isn't doing anything, it's just there, and I will talk about that when I do my mixing walkthrough. But this is sort of how I set up a mix at the beginning. This is just faders, there's no plugins, except for on the vocal, which I'm going to talk about here in a second. So if we open this up, move over, the vocals right here, I have these turned off for now, but in order to compare the Black Rooster Audio plugin, I thought it'd be great to sort of set things up how I would normally set things up in a mix. And at the beginning of a mix, after I get the basic fader mix down with no plugins, I do a sort of a top-down mixing thing. So that's why I have the CQ over here and the acoustic guitar. And then after I have that all set up, I do some processing on the vocals, because I want to be referencing the vocals as often as possible while I'm mixing the rest of the song, because the vocals are sort of the main important part. One of the things that I do first is I do a little bit of EQ. I'm just trying this EQ out, and I'm not sure if I love it or I hate it yet. I'm just trying it out. It seems to sound pretty good, but it came with this month's Computer Music Magazine, which is really cool. So I'm rolling off a little bit of the low end, just making it a little bit lower, because there's no filter, but I'm just doing a low shelf and minus 1.5, 1 to 2 dB. But then I'm doing a high shelf at about 2 dB here, and bringing up about 5 kilohertz by 2 dB, and then boosting some of the warmth at 240. And then after that, I bring in the CA2A compressor. And as I said, the reason for this vocal to have a little bit of processing first is because I want to use this as a reference for the rest of the mix. So a great compressor to use for that sort of purpose, to sort of pin the vocal and make it loud, well, just make it consistent, is an LA-2A. And I use the LA-2A because it's just two knobs, peak reduction and gain. So you just set it up so it has enough compression to even things out, and it's usually going to be good. It's usually going to sound pretty smooth, which is why I like the LA-2A for this. Whereas sometimes if you use some other compressors, it's a bit more obvious. The compression is a lot more obvious, which is why I usually use two compressors in series when I do the actual mix of the vocal. So let's just see how much gain reduction is happening here and what the before and after sounds like.
I'm forever dreaming, dreaming. Tomorrow we'll find just what we need. I'm forever dreaming, dreaming. Tomorrow we'll find just what we need.
And let's solo this so you can hear it a little bit more accurately, so you can hear exactly what's happening to the vocal.
I'm forever dreaming. Tomorrow we'll find just what we need.
So the vocal sounds a lot more open and everything because of the EQ, of course, but it's also very consistent now. But you'll notice that it goes up to possibly 10 dB of compression during the loudest parts. I generally don't like to do that with the LA-2A, but for the purpose of this, it's great because it still sounds pretty good, pretty smooth, right? So let's leave this right here, and let's look for the Black Rooster audio plugin. I think I still have a few days left on the demo. So a quick comparison, you'll notice that everything's basically the same except for this screw here. And I mean, I'm not extremely well versed in everything, but basically the screw makes it so that if I turn it all the way to the left, it's just the high frequencies that are going to be compressed. So you can use this in a similar way as like a de-esser, or if you do something more in the middle, like you can sort of, like if you're compressing bass, you can sort of roll off the low end so that it doesn't compress the low end as much, so that it just punches through a little bit more. But I have this set completely to flat to emulate what seems to be the same here. Apart from that, a couple pluses with the Black Rooster audio is that it's bigger because I have bad eyesight. It doesn't matter too much with the LA-2A since it's just two things you have to worry about, but it's a good sign for future plugins. So let's just set it up to be about the same with the similar to the cakewalk.
I'm forever dreaming. I'm forever dreaming. I'm forever dreaming. Tomorrow we'll find just what we need. I'm forever dreaming. Tomorrow.
All right, so I have it set up about the same. Something you'll notice is that on the cakewalk it's set to about 45, whereas on this it's set to about 75. And this is also set to about 45, but this is set to 35. So the settings, you can't do exact settings on this since they're probably calibrated a little bit differently. So we can compare them side by side. Something that's cool in Reaper is that you can open up the effects dialog thing here, and you can select them both and then press on the PC Control and B for bypass, and it'll switch back and forth. So it's like a very quick way of comparing. And just know that that's what I'm doing. It's Control B. So here we go.
I'm forever dreaming. Tomorrow we'll find just what we need. I'm forever dreaming. Tomorrow we'll find just what we need.
All right, so that was fairly quick. You hear a couple of artifacts when I was switching back and forth. That's because my setup here and recording the screen and whatnot. But they sound basically the same sort of characteristic when it comes to the overall smoothness of the compression, and it is sort of what I'm looking for when I get the VLA-2A type of sound. The Cakewalk, however, pushes the mid-range a little bit better, it sounds like, at least on the vocal. And the VLA-2A has more of the low end, which if you hear a lot of people talk about the VLA-2A, most of what they're saying is that sometimes they just put the VLA-2A on something because it enhances the low end a little bit, just for that character. And so the VLA-2A seems to do that a little bit better than the Cakewalk. However, I feel like if you already have the CA2A, then you don't necessarily need to invest in getting the VLA-2A. But if it goes on sale, I'm definitely interested in picking it up because it is a good plugin, and I kind of like it a little bit more than the Cakewalk because it has just a little bit more character. And this actually gets me excited for future plugins from Black Rooster Audio. So if they do something like an 1176 next, which would make sense because that's sort of the LA2A and 1176 are a very classic combination. So if they do that, then I will definitely be testing it out. And if it seems to be this good, then I will probably grab it. Because I don't have an 1176 anymore. I've been using something else instead, and I've been really sort of missing it. So just for a little bit more, just for the sake of testing out the plugin a little bit more, we can also check it out on the bass DI. And then we can just move it over. And then we'll try it out on the snare so you can sort of hear the type of character it might add. So here's the bass DI by itself, and then I'll dial it in. Yeah, so it still sounds good. It's not making the bass sound weird in any way, at least for me. I don't hear anything. And so last we would want to test it out on the snare, which is the place I like to use it. And I mentioned before to sort of smooth out the top end transients, so limit mode, and try to get just a little bit of reduction. So listen to the snare before first. I feel like it smooths out the transient on the snare a little bit better than the CA2A. So for doing the little trick where you have the 1176 afterwards on all buttons mode to really sort of make the snare hit very hard, if you smooth off the transient beforehand, then you don't have something that's uncontrollable. So it seems to do that a little bit better, and you can really hear it bring out the room. So it may even sound pretty good on the overheads or the room mic. So the last thing we need to check with the VLA-2A is the performance. So it's on the snare by itself. It says 1.1%, so about 1%. about 1% there as well. It's just this is basic i7 laptop with 12 gigabytes of RAM. That's actually not too bad. Since I'm not going to be using the LA-2A on every track, I usually use it on very specific ones like vocals and bass. And then if I want that specific snare sound, then I will use it, but it's not something I use. It's not something I'm going to be using on every single track. So 1% or less than 1% is pretty good. Let's compare that to the CA2A. So let me just turn this on, turn this one off, and go back. And that's the bass DI, 65%. So CA2A is definitely taking up less processing power. But you also have to remember that the Black Rooster audio stuff is fairly new, which means that they may update it to be more efficient later on. So something to keep in mind. The CA2A has been out for a very long time, and I believe it only recently has been very stable on a lot of jobs. So let's sort of look at the Black Rooster Audio VLA-2A, not the CLA-2A. So I guess one last note, would I buy this? If I was comparing this with the CA2A and the VLA-2A, I already know that I prefer the Cakewalk one over the Waves version. So would I buy this over the Cakewalk version? And I think the answer to that is actually yes, but I think I would be happy with either of these plugins, and they are around the same price. I hope you guys like this video, and I will be seeing you guys later in the mix tutorial. All right, see ya.